Hey, it's me, MLB. Here's chapter 17 of Pinpoint. This one's titled Calling in the Forces. Shoto awoke the next morning to the smell of eggs cooking. He inhaled deeply and sat up, stretching and rubbing his eyes. Momo saw movement from the corner of her eye and looked over, smiling as she saw Shoto had woken. "Good morning, Shoto," she said brightly. "Did you sleep well?" "Good morning, Momo." "Yes, I did. Thank you very much," he replied, rolling out of bed and walking towards her. She had to look away to hide the blush on her face. Her butler had brought over some men's clothing, but because Shoto was so broad across the shoulders, none of the shirts fit, so he just opted to sleep in a pair of boxer shorts instead. He walked up behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder, and then waited. She almost went weak at the knees. Would you like some breakfast before we start our search?" she stammered quickly, trying to distract herself from the way his touch was making her feel. "Yes, please," he said avidly, walking around to take a seat at the kitchen bench. "So, what are our first moves?" he asked as he took a seat. "Well, first of all we need to locate all of the abandoned buildings between the mountains and here and run a heat signature through each of them to determine whether or not people have been inside them within the last few days," Momo said, clicking into hero mode instantly. "I have a colleague who can send and read heat signatures, so I'll ask her to help for an hour or so. It shouldn't take too long. Oh, that reminds me," she was talking non-stop now. "Do you have the Hessonite stone with you here? That could come in handy. I might be able to employ another colleague of mine who has super scent," she rambled on, thinking out loud as she prepared Shoto's breakfast and placed it in front of him. He watched her intently, listening to all she had to say. She finally stopped to take a breath for a second. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've just been talking non-stop." Shoto laughed. "No, please, go on. Everything you're saying is very interesting." Momo blushed and smiled. "Back at the Linsu residence in the mountains, your grandmother moped around the shop, looking very dejected. She wiped down some cabinets and stared out the window, sighing heavily. The shop door opened and she turned when she heard the little bell tinkle on the top. "Oh," she said as she recognised the man who had entered. "What brings you here?" "You, ma'am," the man replied, walking purposefully towards her. "What do you mean by that?" she said, fear rising in her voice as she saw the man had a sinister, ulterior motive. He grinned wickedly as he grabbed for her arm. "Let go of me!" your grandma yelled. "Ah, but don't you want to see Yin? She's waiting for you," he said, snickering as he did it. "You!" she hissed. "It was you that took her, wasn't it?" "You got me," he said with a sarcastic grin. "Come on now, come quietly and see her. She misses you. You have nothing here, right?" Your grandma glared intensely at him for a minute, then resigned, letting her arm go limp in his hand. "Oh, but I can't let you see where you're gonna go, so might need to put you to sleep for a bit," he said, quickly slapping a chloroform-soaked rag over her nose and mouth. The last thing your grandma remembers seeing was a flash of a red tattoo. Back with Shoto and Momo, they were getting ready to gear up. "Okay, we have eyes in the sky for the next 1 hour, Momo said, hanging up a phone call and walking back over to Shoto. They had set up office in the lounge room of Momo's apartment. Papers, pens and half-drunk coffee sat in cups on the coffee table in the middle of the room. "Shomi has very kindly offered to seek out all of the abandoned buildings in the area and determine if there are people inside by using her quirk, heat signature," she said, scrolling through her phone contacts looking for the next hero to call. "I will now call our next contact hero, Hiro Kaori, the scent hero. I'll ask him to come here so that he can have a look at the Hessonite stone." "Momo, I can't thank you enough for all you're doing for me. You are going to great lengths to help me," Shoto said from his seat at the coffee table. "Shoto, I've told you before, you mean a lot to me and there's nothing I wouldn't do for you." And with that she turned and rang Kaori. Shoto pulled out his phone and put his old SIM card back in, scrolling through the most recent calls. His thumb hovered over the unknown number that had rung him the day that he was at the Kichona family residence. "I should probably ring Yin's grandmother and tell her everything that's going on, and tell her that it will be okay. We are increasing our search power and will have Yin back home safely soon." He pressed call. The phone rang and then rang out, and he frowned and looked up at Momo as she finished her call. "I just tried ringing Yin's grandmother, but she didn't pick up," he said. "Something tells me that this is not a good thing." He stared down at his phone. Inspector! The detective hollered down the hallway. We have a pinpoint! We just got a signal from Shoto's phone. Where is he? The inspector yelled back, racing out of his office while throwing his coat on. 546th Street, Block 4! He shouted, only just managing to get the address out before the inspector disappeared out the building door. The inspector grabbed his phone out and punched the address in as he ran. I'll get you, you bastard, he growled internally. If you have anything to do with this mess, then there'll be hell to pay. He nearly broke stride as he looked at his phone again. A name had popped up next to the address that he had just keyed in. Momo Yaoyorozu, he yelled in disbelief. Oh dear. I hope everything turns out okay. Let's stay tuned for chapter 18.